Hi, this is Naveen Nanjundappa. Today, we are going to talk about the most commonly used terminologies: definition of ready, definition of done, and acceptance criteria. Let's once for all clear our doubts in these three terminologies. In fact, these are the terms that are used as a tool and a technique to make our job easier, faster, better, and simpler. What are these things? And let's see some examples of them. The definition of ready. The definition of ready is basically used as a readiness criteria for the product backlog items before they get started in the sprint. So they are very similar to the entry criteria or a start criteria. But don't get confused as a checklist. These are soft checklist or a soft criterias. This is just a guidelines for you to get ahead to say how confident you are to get started and do you see any big challenges before you get started. If some of the definition of ready are not met, does not mean that you have to have a hard stop, but you can take an evaluated decision whether to move forward. Is it worthwhile to move forward? Is it high risk or a moderate risk to move forward? Typically, a low risk situation is good to go even if the definition of ready is not met. It defines the condition for all product backlog items to be considered as ready before the sprint starts, and the teams can pull them during the sprint planning meeting. They are mutually agreed list and they are common for all the product backlog items. So all the product backlog items will be checked with respect to the definition of ready before they are claimed to be ready and be planned during the sprint. A typical examples of definition of ready could be: acceptance criteria are discussed and mutually agreed by the team. There are no unanswered questions. There are no dependencies and there are no risks. And if at all there are any dependencies and risks, the teams have mutually agreed and resolved the dependencies and risks. The size of the product backlog item is small and it is inspect adaptable within a sprint. The product backlog item is prioritized and ordered. The product backlog items don't have any assumptions, and if at all the team has any assumptions, they all are clarified. Many more. These are just a few criterias in which direction you can look at creating your own definition of ready. While you're creating a definition of ready, the development team, the developers, the Scrum Master, the product owner have to be together to identify what they mutually agree as a definition of ready. Remember, this is a criteria that's mutually agreed to say the product backlog item is ready to be pulled during the sprint. It's a very effective tool if you use it in the right sense, and it can also be misleading if you start looking at it as a checklist. So avoid looking at it as a checklist and a mandatory list for you to work on. The next item is the definition of done. Definition of done is all the things that the team has to do to claim that they are 100% done developing the product and the product is now done and usable version which is ready to ship to the customer. This includes all the process and quality related steps. Basically, the process and quality related steps that the team takes in order to develop the product. For example, if you are developing a software, then you would have to go through a software development lifecycle or a stages before you say that, okay, we are completed 100% done with the product development. Exactly that way, the team members can list down what are the process steps, the quality steps, and the actions that they have to do on all the product backlog items and on the product increment so that they can confidently claim that they are done and the product can be with high quality. The definition of done describes the quality of the product, or it evolves over a period of time as the skill set in the team evolves. This defines the state when the teams can claim that their work is completed. So when you say that the work is completed, it basically means that the team members are confident of saying the product can now go to the shipment or can be released to the customer anytime without their involvement and their activities are 100% done. They are mutually agreed and it applies to the product increment. So if there are 3 or more teams or multiple teams working on the common product, there are high chances that these multiple teams will share the common definition of done. They can also add on extra definition of done specific to their teams and the nature of the work. Predominantly, it is focused on quality of the product and then the process that you follow, and it is towards building a high quality usable product increment, which can be predominantly said as done. A few examples of definition of done could be: the design and coding has been completed and done, the quality checks have been completed, the functional checks and the test related to that are completed, the reviews are completed to ensure that there is a high quality, the documentation, if required, they are completed, the organization defined process and quality standards are followed, and any other ... additional things that you want to add on. This is just an example of definition of done, not necessarily a guidelines that you have to follow them. You have to derive your list of definition of done that applies to your product, looking at these as an example. Let's go to the acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is a mutually agreed solution statement for a problem that you're trying to solve, and this predominantly translates into a functionality that you want to apply. So this is a mutually agreed solution that you would want to apply or you would want to increment your product with. It's a functionality. It's a product functionality that you want to see in the product and focus towards solving a problem. It's a guidelines for the team to say, what kind of solutions are we building? What kind of functionalities are we developing? It also helps you in validating those. There are high chances that your acceptance test, the user acceptance test, can all be derived, functional tests can all be derived through acceptance criteria, because these are the design solutions that you can think of. They are mutually agreed to define the functionalities as well. So everyone is clear and they define the functionality that you want to implement. As agreed, that mutually agreed, and it is applied to the whole increment. So the functionality is as part of the product increment and not just isolated. So if you want to build a product, the product has to satisfy and solve a certain problem or provide a certain opportunity and functionality to the user. With acceptance criteria, you're narrowing down those opportunities and options that the user is going to get through your product. So look at acceptance criteria as a mutually agreed solution statement and how are you trying to solve the problem. A few examples of acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria are unique and they don't repeat, unlike the product definition of done and definition of ready. Acceptance criteria for a specific functionality could be like list the top 16 items that are on sales. It could be search options that are present or implementation of a search options with multiple search criteria. Ability to have a grid view and a list view display. Compare items that are selected. It could also be to add an item with the quantity to the cart. Now, these are all the options that you provide for the user to perform, or each one of this could be solving certain steps or a problem. Those are your acceptance criteria. I think with this, you have come to understand that the 3 terms that we are using commonly, the definition of done, definition of ready, and the acceptance criteria, they are 3 different things at different instances of time by the development team. We use this. The definition of ready is an entry for a product backlog item into the sprint. It checks there. Definition of done checks the doneness criteria for the team to claim that they are done. And acceptance criteria is at that last stage where the product is satisfying certain criteria so that it is worthwhile to be handed over to the customer or users. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you so much. And with this, we're going to get into the next section,